Do you ever think videos shot on your camera or phone look a bit normal and boring compared to Hollywood movies, even the older ones with ancient technology? Well, there's a reason and a solution. And maybe it's not to enhance the footage, but to de-hance it. In this video, I'll be showing examples of footage shot on a phone and on a mirrorless camera. But first, to explain our solution that we're going to get into, let's look at the longest running pinnacle of great visuals, the movies. Hollywood movies have been shot on film for over a century. That's why they're called films. And movie film is basically the same as the photographic film you'd put in your 35mm camera at home. If you're old like me, then every film of your childhood would have been shot on film. It wasn't until 2002 that the first digitally shot blockbuster to hit cinemas would ditch film entirely.
Oh my god.
That movie was Star Wars Episode II: Attack of the Clones. There had been a few films before that were shot using digital technology, such as Julia vs. Julia in 1987, which was believed to be the very first. Over the next 2 decades, digital would overtake film as the primary way of shooting movies.
The first cinema camera ever to shoot to the cloud.
But while it might be far easier and cheaper, to many, going digital loses a bit of visual magic that you get from shooting on film. Christopher Nolan, Wes Anderson and Quentin Tarantino are among the big believers in film and have shot movies such as Inception, Grand Budapest Hotel and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on it. Whether film looks better than digital is possibly subjective, but some believe it has different qualities. Perhaps one of the reasons for this is digital images are made up of a grid of pixels, while film is organic chemicals, which blends the light and colour they capture rather than it all just being a 1 or a 0. The look of film is determined by what choice of film stock you use, which affects how colours are perceived and translated, a bit like an Instagram filter, but not really. Certain films like Kodak Portra handle skin tones really well because of how they interpret those hues, while others like Cinestill 800T are popular for night shots because it was designed and coloured to be shot under artificial light. The T next to the 800 stands for tungsten. Film stocks also have their own natural unique grain which adds character and texture to the image. These things combined mean the images you get back from shooting on film won't look quite the same as you see them with your eyes or with a digital device. Shooting on film is beautiful, but these days, for your average person, it's quite a challenging process and expensive. If only there was a way to shoot on digital, but get the look of film later. Bang. Just blowing up power supplies. Dehancer Pro is a video plugin that combines a suite of tools to replicate the look of film. It's available for Premiere, After Effects, DaVinci, and what I'll be using it in, Final Cut. What it's not is a LUT or an Instagram filter. I'll go into why it's different later. Dehancer has been created by a team of 13 people led by Pavel Kushenko, who himself has been working with film in the darkroom for 40 years as both a photographer and colorist. They go into so much depth on their website about how they created the technology to emulate the look of film on digital.
We're making profiles for our application called Dehancer.
It's a mix of experience, science, maths, and black magic. There are over 60 film emulation profiles to choose from, and then different stages of film processing. That I'll go into in more depth later, but they include things such as developer, grain, bloom, halation, and film breath. So let's do what everyone does on YouTube and dive in. Oh God. I think it's important before I get into the weeds of how the software works to show some before and after examples of what it can do. Then you can have an idea of what those tools do and how they look. While I was in the Netherlands, I went around Amsterdam and a couple of other places and shot the same scenes using both my iPhone and my Canon R7. So there are examples shot on the iPhone using Filmic Pro Log to show what you can do if you want to push what your phone can do. Then there's Canon Log for an idea of how it handles flat footage from a modern mirrorless camera, and also standard Rec. 709 clips from the R7, which will show how it deals with any kind of normal footage, whether that's a DSLR, a mirrorless, or your average phone's inbuilt camera app. I don't always have iPhone clips because, to be honest, sometimes I forgot. So let's look at the first example, but bear in mind with all of these that you won't necessarily see the full effect because YouTube compression is going to reduce how much things like film grain come across. But you'll get the gist. Here's a little beach in Holland shot with the Canon R7 in the standard Rec. 709 faithful mode, and now here it is with the Dehancer Kodak Vision 3 emulation. This is it shot in log, but with the same Dehancer film look. I really liked this little moment in Amsterdam with all these old bicycles, so I thought here's a suitable vintage look with the Kodak Eastman black and white film. Here is the log version, and just for a treat, here's a little look with film breath and gate weave. Now, if you're wondering what the Filmic Pro iPhone footage looks like, then here's a comparison with this Register / Till, gone with the Fuji Natura 1600 footage and a Fuji print, as well as the analog limiter, the range limiter is on this one. And I think this phone footage looks fantastic. Another little phone comparison for you, here is Provia 100F on Rec 709 log, and here comes the Filmic Pro version, looking good. This isn't going to be the best use of CineStill 800T you've ever seen, but I really like it on this alleyway footage in Amsterdam, adds a real grittiness and character. Right, let's go to the beach for something completely different. Let's transform this grey log footage into something beautiful and warm with Kodak Vision 3. Similar results from the Rec 709 and the log footage. My favourite time and place is sunset on a beach, so let's use that to try out some expired film, some Agfa Chrome, which went off in 2006. A bit later on the same beach, here is some Kodak Ektachrome E100 with an emulation of Endura glossy paper print. I hope that was an interesting quick look at the range of film stocks and how they look in different environments, but to kind of pull this all together and give you an idea of what Dehancer can look like across a project, here's a 1-minute short shot in Rec 709 with no planning about the most important thing in Holland, the bicycle.
Life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. Look ahead, not at the ground or what's behind you. When a turn is coming up, lean with the curve. Enjoy the freedom and wherever it takes you. And remember, the destination isn't as important as the journey.
These lights are a bit much. It's a bit more subtle. Right, Dehancer Pro is one of the most complete plugins I've ever seen and has an incredible amount of options and sliders. So this video could go on for hours if I was to go into each one. This video isn't an in-depth analysis of each tool, it's just a review of the software and what it can be used for. So I'll go over what I think are the key bits for me, having been using it for the past couple of months. So let's jump into Final Cut. So let's take this clip here of a cash register, as my American friends would say, or a till, as we say in England, and apply the Dehancer plugin. Then we choose our input source and camera to match what we shot to the film profiles. Already lovely. Then we can dive in and start to create our film look. You've also got settings here for exposure compensation, temperature compensation, tint, and some defringe stuff as well. Then perhaps the most important choice, the film. There's loads of choices here between color negative, slide, or black and white film. Look at all those. We'll leave it on the classic Kodak Vision 3 250D. You've also got the option to push or pull the film, which is something you can do when you develop film to over or underdevelop the film, which can help control the image contrast, colors, or exposure, depending on the film and how it was exposed. The Film Developer panel is a new addition to Dehancer. Without going into detail, it's the slider equivalent of altering the recipe of your chemicals when developing to achieve certain tasks like boosting contrast, gamma, or saturation. Then we come on to film compression, another new tool. This tries to convert the way an electronic sensor handles light, and specifically clipping highlights, to how photographic emulsion handles it, which is basically smoother. There's some great examples here from Dehancer themselves. The idea behind Expand is to make a final scan correction. This lets you raise or lower your black and white points to tweak the darkest and lightest limits of your image. But it's not the same as just tweaking your levels. Expand doesn't correct the final image, but rather adjust the profile itself so that its dynamic range corresponds to the contrast of the source image at the input section. Clever stuff. Film printing is the last technical stage of analog movie production. It creates a film print that can either be shown with a film projector or scanned and then used for digital delivery. Often in digital color grading, a print emulation of Kodak 2383 is used as the last stage of processing. The options here, other than 2383, are linear, which means no print profile is applied, just the original film stock. Cineon Film Log creates a Cineon scanned emulation of the original stock. Fujifilm 3513 is a new addition to Dehancer and lets you print on the same Eterna film that the Lord of the Rings, the Butterfly Effect, Twilight and many other movies were printed on. Kodak Endura glossy paper is exactly what it says, an emulation of an actual paper print. But I'm going to go with the classic Kodak 2383 print film. And just because I fancy being really vintage, I'm going to tick the analog range limiter button, which just limits the range. Colorhead allows you to tweak the ink ratios of the virtual printer to achieve a custom look. If you really want to dive in and grade your footage and tweak the shadows, midtones and highlights separately, then this is a way to do that. Grain is such a key component of film. It already exists in the film before shooting on it because it's basically the visible silver crystals in a film negative's emulsion. So the greater the ISO, generally, the bigger the grain. But how you expose and develop your film will also affect the grain. The Dehancer team go into incredible detail on their website articles about what grain is and how it works in real life and how they model it. But I'll break it down to this. They say after years of study and experiments, they have created a reliable mathematical 3D model that allows us to generate flexibly controlled analog-like procedural grain. They really stress that grain isn't just an overlay, and I think you can tell when a video has just had a grain layer slapped on top. They say their algorithm generates grain based on local color and brightness characteristics of the image, and because of that, it's always related to it. Don't understand it, but it sounds great. Halation is a visual effect that is most easily seen around bright light sources. It shows up when shooting on a film as a red-orange halo near the contrasting areas of overexposed areas, as well as a red glare in the midtones. It's yet another imperfection of film that has become desirable to add character to the footage. Now, it's easy to overcook this and go too far, and I've certainly been guilty of that. There's loads of tools here to control how the halation is interpreted. There's not really any excuse. Bloom is another imperfection, and you can actually buy mist filters for your camera that add this by sprinkling a layer of speckles onto the glass that sits in front of your lens. It generally softens the image and blooms the highlights. You might have noticed a similar effect if you've ever used your phone camera with a bit of a dirty lens. Bloom isn't technically caused by film, but by the lens. Most obvious in old lenses with poorly coated glass, but Dehancer say that while this glow is produced by optical systems, it's then altered and amplified by diffusion and scattering processes on the film. In both halation and bloom panels, you can mask the image to see only the effect, which is really helpful. I'm going to move past vignette because it's obvious. Film breath and gate weave I'll tackle together because they're quite closely related, as they're to do with the way the film physically moves through the camera or projector or scanner. Again, artifacts that weren't originally a welcome part of the image. It's a tricky one in a way because it's almost impossible to see the effect in a single static frame. I'm just going to switch to a different clip to show you the effects of film breath and gate weave. So here's a shot of this vintage car that was in Amsterdam. Here it is with the same Dehancer settings as before, but without any of the film breath or gate weave. That slight movement is from the camera. It wasn't on the tripod. Film breath is an accidental change in exposure, contrast and colour from frame to frame as the film moves due to subtle differences in the film, the shutter and the development. Gate weave is the mechanical swinging of the film strip while it's being pulled through the camera or projector. Dehancer also comes with tools to monitor false colour, clipping and has a LUT generator, but we said earlier that Dehancer isn't a LUT, and I will go into why later, but for now, this LUT generator is an option to create a LUT that can be used on set while shooting to get an idea of how the image will look, rather than create a preset. So it doesn't include all the tools when creating it, just colour space mapping and filtering. The amount of options Dehancer gives you is ridiculous, to the point where it might actually be ridiculous. I'm a simple man, and sometimes being given lots of options can make me want to play around with all of them, which is time consuming. There's almost too many sliders and choices. For some, it could be overwhelming. For others, it'll be like a film nirvana. The film emulations in Dehancer look great, with a lot of variety between the stocks on offer. I can't comment on if they are authentic replications of the actual film stocks, because I've never shot moving pictures on actual film yet, and there's no way of fairly comparing what I shoot on my limited time and budget to that of Hollywood movies and all the experts involved with lighting and cinematography of those productions. There are just too many variables for it to be worthwhile. So much of this tool will be down to personal preference, but this isn't a one-stop trick to make your footage look like a Hollywood movie. A Hollywood film isn't just shot on film. If you're wondering what sort of super beefy computer you need for this, I'd probably not worry. I noticed no real effect on speed on my MacBook Pro 2020 M1, although the final export did take a little bit longer when compared to just using LUTs. Full system requirements are available on their website. So back to the question of why isn't it a LUT? Well, Dehancer explain it themselves like this. Open quotes. A LUT is merely a table of color change values. It cannot contain all the characteristics of the film that determine the feel of the film image. Dehancer is a complete and comprehensive tool for the film emulation, which recreates all the main characteristics of the film. At the same time, the tools in Dehancer work according to the put that word on screen, analogous to the principles, and do not destroy the original color ratios of the film during its interpretation. If you've got this far, then you're probably interested in getting Dehancer, and it's at this point I have to tell you the price. Before I do though, you can get 10% off with my promo code Bartlett10 over at dehancer.com. A lifetime license for Final Cut and Premiere is $399, while the DaVinci version with film damage, which also gets 8mm film emulations that hopefully will be coming to the others soon to give those options in Final Cut and Premiere and everything else, is $449. There are alternative price points for 3 months, 6 months, and a year, as well as a slightly stripped-back lifetime light version for $199 that has all the film profiles, the film grain, and some other tools. You can also buy just individual sections like grain or bloom for $99. Dehancer also have a dedicated photo editing plugin for Lightroom, Photoshop, Capture One, and Affinity Photo. It's $199, and an iOS app that have the same great technology behind it and produce fantastic results. There's another video all about that coming up, but in the meantime, these are some examples. I loved how Dehancer has given me a film look for my videos to sit nicely with the genuine film photography that goes on here. Even if I wasn't doing film photography, I think I'd still want to embrace that look. There's a warmth and character to it that is really beautiful. One of my pet hates with digital video and a lot of modern cinema is that it looks so digital. It won't be for everyone, but if you're still here, then it's probably for you. If you're into film, I really recommend it, even with the price tag. It's far cheaper and less ball ache than shooting and developing actual film. And just to be clear, this is not any kind of paid for review or anything like that, although Dehancer did supply me with a copy of the software for review. Thanks for watching. If you've got this far, please leave a like and let me know in the comments where you stand on the film versus digital debate and what you think of Dehancer. Subscribe if you haven't already for more film photography and videography vids, and if you want to watch something else, really recommend this one. Don't have nightmares. Goodbye.